So let me say N has bought a machine. So X contributes $50 to buy this machine, and Y contributes $50 to this machine. And let me say this machine is bought with $200. So the $100 is covered by X and Y, and the rest $100 is covered by with the liability. So let me say at some point X and Y want their money back. They want this $100 back. What will they do? This time this machine will be sold with, let us say the machine is sold for $200, and the money is returned or given back to X and Y. This time we cannot say X and Y has a right, a full right on this asset, because if they have a right on this asset, on a full asset, they should pay the liability and all the risk and the reward of this machine or this $200 is the risk and the reward of X and Y companies. So if the money is given to them, so that they do not have the right on the whole assets, unlike the joint operation. But if it was a joint operation, they are fully responsible for these machines. But this time they can take their money back, and the rest $100 that's brought by with the liability is paid by the N, the operation. I mean the arrangement. To use the assets, the portion that doesn't come by liability of the arrangement So what do I mean is they have a right on this 100 portion, but they do not have an obligation with to pay the rest 100 that came from the liability. So what do we mean asset minus liability? Asset minus liability is equity or net asset. So they have a right on the net asset portion, and they do not have an obligation to pay this. But they have to use the asset. They have a right to use the asset, the portion that doesn't come by the liability of the arrangement, and no obligation to pay the arrangement's liability. So the asset is the arrangement's asset, and the liability is the liability. The liability is the arrangement's liability, not venture's liability. So let me look at. So there a criteria to classify an arrangement is an operation or a venture. From the start we have already classified using this criteria. If like the housing project, if the arrangement is established in the form of activity, by default it is there is no need for additional criteria. It's an operation, a joint. The joint arrangement is a joint operation. But if it's established in the form of business or in the form of organization or in the form of company, there are additional 3 criteria. But what is the intuitive explanation? We classify all activities as a joint operation and not as a joint venture. The reason is, if the arrangement is established as an activity, by default it's a joint operation, because an activity, for example such as the housing project, cannot by itself be liable for the arrangement's liability, because if there are X and Y, the housing project cannot by itself be liable for, so the liability will lie on X and Y, or will fall on the shoulders of X and Y by default. So the arrangement could not be liable. But if they form it in the form of business, that business might have a liability and can also pay his liability on its own without the help of them. But that's why if the arrangement is in the form of business, we need an additional criteria. Good.